Hello, my name is Paul Tilstone from FESTIVE Road, and today I'm in conversation with three members of the Black travel community to talk about the impact of Black Lives Matter and what the travel industry, business travel industry in particular, should or could be doing regarding racial prejudice. I'm joined today by Carmen Smith from ICF. Hey, Carmen.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Carol Fergus from Fidelity.
Hi, Paul. Nice to be here.
No problem at all. Good to have you. And Ranga Chidawanyika from SBE and Accor.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So let's start. I think a little bit of context is great. So Carmen and Ranga will come to you in a second, but Carol, let me start with you. We decided as FESTIVE Road that we wanted to embark on a listening exercise to try and better understand the need for greater racial diversity and inclusion within our sector. It's something that my business partner Caroline has been very adamant about when it comes to gender equality. And so we've been listening hard now on racial equality, and that resulted in a conversation that you and I had. And you challenged me and FESTIVE Road to try and encourage more of a voice around racial equality. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that and I guess what it is that you would like to see and expect from this type of conversation?
Well, the reason why I came to you, Paul, was because, I've been in the industry for a really long time, more years than I care to divulge. And, we talked about a number of things. And one of the things that you mentioned was, this term colorblind. And for a long time, I've been in the industry where I've had quite a good career within the travel industry. And some might say that I've been relatively privileged in that, I've gone and I've been able to grow and get myself to a really good career. And, I suddenly, after George Floyd, had a look around me and had this awakening. And I suddenly thought, you know what, I've probably been one of these people that has been colorblind in terms of I've not noticed where other people like me in these roles. And I just felt that that it was my duty to actually come to you, have this discussion and say, okay, how can we make a change? How can we make sure that there are more people in senior roles that are Black in the travel industry that we're not seeing? And, that's why it was so important to me to have that discussion. And when I think of colourblind, I think there's been a lot of us that has gone around and not seen what's happening around us. We've not stopped, we've not thought about it, taken a breath, and then come up and then listened and come up with some real tangible and positive ways of making a change. And that's why this is so important to me. And then there are some people that all they see, the only colour they see is Black, and that needs to change. We want to be equal. We want to be seen in the same way as everybody else. And, the opportunities that are there, we want to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to grasp and get on and build a career within travel, which is an amazing industry in the same way. So that's why it's important to me. Okay.
And I think you also mentioned that you weren't hearing enough leading voices within the sector talking more about the importance of racial diversity and championing racial diversity in our leadership. Would that be a fair statement as well?
Absolutely. A lot of the panels that you see, a lot of the conferences that you see, there is very few Black faces on those panels championing the industry. And I think that we need to see more of that. Today we've got two amazing people with me on the panel, which is a classic example of the quality of people that are out there. And you have to be seen. You have to be seen to be. And I think it's important that when you do these panels, when you do these conferences, that you look across the board and say, okay, are we tapping into everything, not equality, gender, everything, so that we're getting a balanced view and everybody feels that they're party to what's going on, they have a voice and they have a seat.
Okay, great. So I'm going to come to Ranga and then Carmen just about the work that you're doing in terms of diversity and inclusion, and also the roles within your business as well. It's good to get some context as to what you do. Before I do that, just you asked me why I chose the term colourblind for the blog that announced the fact that we were doing this first interview, and I think I described it to you as I see our sector and I think it's such a great sector. And I personally have never felt that I have any racial bias, and I've never seen racial bias in our sector, but it clearly exists. And there is bias within me as a white middle-aged male in the United Kingdom, all sorts of biases, that you use for positive and negative forces. So I need to be honest with myself and say, actually, that those biases, I need to check myself and make sure that I'm using them for a force for good and not a force for bad. And that's where the term colourblindness came from for the article. So Ranga, let's go to you first and just ask you about the role that you're playing at the moment in diversity and inclusion and within your business as well.
Hi, Paul. So I am Director of Global Sales for SBE and Accor Hotels, based here in North America, but raised in London, England, where I know Carol very well from. I founded a networking group for professionals in the travel industry with the mission of supporting and enriching Black men's careers in the industry through fellowship and community. And that's called the Black Men's Travel Network. Just started last month. We had our second meeting yesterday, virtual meeting. It's open globally, although most of our members are here in North America, but it is open for the UK and Europe and the rest of the world too.
Why did you specifically choose Black men?
I think because I can speak to that experience. Okay. It really started for me with the Ahmaud Arbery case and then George Floyd, and having peers, colleagues call me, throughout that week, and me not being able to really express how I felt. I just felt, and as men, we tend to keep our emotions very close to our chests at times. And I thought, it would be nice for a safe space for men, Black men in particular, who are always taught, always brought up and taught to be strong, to not show how you truly feel, and to work 10 times harder than anyone else. And I didn't want that to be mixed up with anything else. So it was for us men to just pour out our emotions and speak from the heart and not worry about anything else, and really create that safe space for them.
Okay, great. I'm a bit of an emotional waterfall, so I'm not like most men, unfortunately. Carmen, tell us a little bit about how you're involved in championing diversity and inclusion, and also I think you talked a little bit about the origination of your business, ICF, from the Tuskegee Airmen, but in the last video we did, but you didn't explain what the Tuskegee Airmen were, and I think that was a really nice story. So if you could tell that as well.
Well, certainly. Well, hello, everyone. And again, I'm Carmen from ICF. ICF was started by a Tuskegee Airmen, which during World War II, they were Black pilots. And it actually started out as an experiment for the U.S. government to see if Blacks were competent. I think the premise, again, and you were talking about race, is our credibility. And I know Ranga talked about it a little bit, Carol talked about it a little bit, but when it comes to us and comes to race, the credibility doesn't always seem to be there. But these Black men, very educated men, already educated, college educated men. And so the experiment was to see if they could fly a plane, as good as their white counterparts. And to make a long story short, they flew, it was the 332nd, I think, Battalion. They were based over in Europe, in Italy, I think, for most of the part of it. But Tuskegee is a university in Alabama in the US. And so it's a historically Black university. And they trained there. They went there. In fact, Eleanor Roosevelt, so President Roosevelt was the president at the time. She actually flew with one of these gentlemen. But the glory of this is they were to escort the bombardiers during the time in Germany over, with Hitler and his army. And their white counterparts didn't show up. And so these bombardiers were getting massacred, trying to travel through the air. And so the Tuskegee Airmen, by accident, saw the bombardiers on this particular day, and they went and supported them. And they shot the Germans down, protected them, got the bombardier to its location safely. And as a result, they were actually requested from then. And so during the entire time of World War II, as long as they were flying and escorting, they never lost one plane. Now, they didn't lose their lives, but they didn't lose one plane. And it showed their excellence in the face of danger. It showed their excellence in the time. And so for us in the Black community, in the U.S. Black community, it's a place of, glory, a place of, just, heroship, to be honest. And so ICF in 1969 was started by Clarence Lucky Lester, and they called him Lucky because he came through alive. And then he also actually shot down 3 German planes during that time. And he decided that originally ICF was an investment firm. It originally stood for inner city funding, and he wanted to ensure that Black businesses in the Washington, D.C. area received their proper funding for small businesses or Black-owned businesses, and that's how it originally started. Of course, it's now evolved into a global consulting firm. I call it consulting with a twist, but it's also, as you coined it, Paul, business with a heart. Anything that's globally and socially impactful, we are involved in. So whether it's climate change, disaster relief management, human trafficking prevention, these are just some of the major projects that we're involved in. And it, not only because of who started the company, but these things are near and dear to me and to my heart. And so it was a great fit for me professionally and philosophically.
And I think what's really sweet is you're working for a company that was established by a man who directly fought fascism. And now you're empowered within that business to support the wider travel industry in creating more diversity and inclusion. And I think, Carol, we'll come back to, I think Carmen and yourself are playing a role within the TAMS project to champion diversity and inclusion. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's start with, I guess, probably the biggest question, which is, help us open our eyes. Where do you see the racial challenges within the travel sector?
I think our number one challenge is underrepresentation in the workforce. And when I say underrepresentation, I mean at senior or board level. And really having organizations embrace the diversity. That's where I think it starts from, and the biggest challenge.
Why do you think that underrepresentation occurs? It's like a multiplying effect of, first of all, that Black employees are overlooked, and secondly, that is there enough confidence in Black employees to put themselves forward for more senior roles? Do you think it's a kind of a dual effect, or there's something else at play as well?
I do think that. I do think there's some implicit biases that are at play. But at the same time, I just think there's not much visibility when it comes to the Black and minorities within their workforce, within their organization. So if they're not getting that visibility, they just kind of stay at the same level and not looking up for promotions. And
I agree with you, Ranga. I think that if you're not seeing the same people as yourselves at those levels, it's very easy to become very despondent and think that is the case. And as a result of that, as a Black person, you will not bring your whole self to the organization, because you will feel that you are treated as a minority, and sometimes it becomes accepting, and that needs to change. And that's why the visibility needs to be there, so that people feel inspired to do more and to bring their whole self to the organisation. And so I do think it's the dual thing. It's a double-edged sword. And, you know, the more that we see more Black leaders out there, the more our Black staff or Black people in the industry will be thinking, hey, there's a road for me too. And they will strive to move up that channel and walk that road. And I think that's the key message, that, you know, organisations need to start lifting their heads and saying, how can we make this happen? And really look around them and see the staff that they have in front of them, and, you know, ask themselves, are we genuinely doing our best for these individuals? And are we genuinely giving them the opportunities based on their abilities and their skills? And I don't believe that there is any Black person out there that expects to be moved to board level who hasn't got the ability to be a board director. But if they do, then they should be given a fair chance to be that person.
I think that's, you know, just kind of echoing, you know, what Ranga and both Carol have said. I think there's, you know, with anybody, there are subconscious biases. And even though travel is very diverse, I mean, for example, I was a former Pan Am flight attendant. You couldn't get any more diverse in a job, but everyone has their own personal philosophies, beliefs, creeds, and, you know, depending on where they're raised. And so that does filter over even into the travel industry. I know that in a couple of occasions, I have tried to or applied to be on certain committees and in certain organizations, and, you know, wasn't able to. Also, when we go to large conventions, it's very difficult to find ourselves. And you really want to see yourselves, because as Ranga talked about, that support group, you know, who do you have to support one another, you know, and that's a big issue. Now, I will say, and I'm going to call this particular organization out. That was Women in Travel, Win It, originally founded by Mick Lee. And I will have to say that that organization really did try to address not only the women in travel and the ceiling that we had, but also the lack of diversity within it. And the type of speakers that they had at these conferences, you know, really cut through the noise, and they cut through the chase and really dealt with and had some key people that talked about those statistics. And I think that we as a travel industry have to look at ourselves. And as you know, you say sometimes, Paul, it has to be a self-reflection. You know, you think that you may not be racist, you think you may not have these biases, but we all have to do a self-reflection and look at it and say, if I had two resumes, one next to another, one was my friend, who may not be the best qualified, and one who is not like me, who is very qualified, who am I going to choose? Because we know within the travel industry, we tend to choose our friends over somebody that may be more qualified. And sometimes we're not willing to make those hard choices that really need to be made.
It's interesting sorry, go on, Carol.
And added to that, if you have somebody within your organisation who recognises your skills, what happens from that is you motivate that individual to be and do more, okay? So I've been very fortunate at Fidelity, the organisation that I work for, where I've had 3 managers who have, since I've been there. And all 3, I have to say, have been an ally to me in terms of they have seen me as Carol, the global travel manager, and they've allowed me to do my job, and they've not macromanaged, and they've accepted my knowledge and my experience, and they've seen me and made me feel that I am the guru of travel within Fidelity. What that has done is really motivated me and inspired me to do an extremely good job for them. That's what happens if you look after your people and you give them the credit for the role that they do, and you accept and judge them for what they deliver and not the colour of their skin. And that's what we're asking for. You know, demonstrate to us that you accept us for who we are, and you show us that by what we're delivering and the value we bring to the company, you are then giving us the opportunities that you would give anybody in the organisation. And that's really, really important.
What I find really interesting is that when I've asked that open question about what the challenges are, it's not overt racism that any of you referred to. It's that discrete ingrained bias and prejudice that you just kind of grow up with. And in many ways, because it's hidden, it's more difficult to deal with, because overt racism you can deal with. And, you know, I hope that within our sector that people would be prepared to stand up if that overt racism occurred. But when it's those hidden prejudices, you know, I find it really interesting that you've all related to those prejudices. And I think it's also great that you've referenced WINIT and the Women in Travel, because I see echoes of the challenges with women within the travel community as well. And I 100% hear your point about it's about inspiration. You want to see people reflecting your own cultures and values on stage in leadership positions. And, you know, it takes more than just confidence to get to those positions. You've got to have, to your point, allies championing people of colour in those positions and in public environments and stage. So I find that really fascinating. What else is it that we should or could be doing other than kind of trying to have that frame of mind?
Well, I would think, Paul, just moments like this. You know, it wasn't honestly until I posted something on the GBTA site that I even came to the forefront because of the thinking. You know, most people didn't know who I was, so it was and I would say in that regard, you know, a very neutral territory. And so my proposition brought about thought. And so the thought carried itself and became a life of its own. And as a result, that catapulted me, I would say, into the forefront where now people know, okay, who is Carmen Smith? And so then they were able to see, but you always have to have an opportunity. And so it has to be those that are in places of influence, places of power, that have to be able to recognize, you know, talent across the board, regardless of what shape, form, color it's in, and be able to say, hey, you know, you really have some valid things to say. I would like you to be part of my platform, or I would like you to have this to say. And I think it's folks like you, like Festive Road, and others. BTN is another one. You know, you have to be able to recognize those things and say, hey, I would like to invite you in. And I think when it's an effort, a concerted effort to do so, then it allows other people to see into and then rethink maybe their positions.
Okay, let's talk about I guess where we're seeing some of that stuff occurring because of overt behaviour, like your community, Ranga. What are the types of activities that you're overtly trying to deliver to that community?
Well, we came up with three sort of pillars that really are the forefront and the founding foundations of our organization, and that's networking and brotherhood, recruitment and training, and mentorship and development. So it really around networking. Brotherhood is just getting us all together, being able to speak to one another. We you know, we're so used to being in a room, in a meeting where it's just me as the only Black person, or it could be Carmen as the only Black person. And when you go to these conventions and things, you know, it's good to see someone else who looks like me, but you don't know, you know, where they work, what they do, and it's just good to connect to one another that way. We all know we talked about jobs here and how people hire their friends. That's no different within our industry, and I think when we talk about recruitment and influence, that's where we come in. You know, I think right now in the travel industry, it's been decimated, and a lot of people are losing their jobs. And being able to know someone, you know, we have a buyer in our organization from a big pharmaceutical company, and he's recruiting for a role in Boston. You know, and he's put it out to our community. He said, hey, if any of you need a job, you know, let me know. Just hand over your resume. I've got this role going, you know. So having that network that where we can, and we have a lot of talented people within our group, that just helps with recruitment. And then mentorship. There are a lot of, you know, when I was, as my career was progressing, I found it very difficult. Yes, I had a few mentors, but I find it difficult to find a mentor who had the same life experiences that I had, you know, which are very, very different to a non-minority sometimes, especially in the industry where we're talking about these biases. And we're not saying, look, you know, I need help here and there. It's just I need someone to help me navigate this workplace, you know, and that's where the mentorship and development also comes from.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you when we get to the section about what can we be doing to support more diversity and inclusion. One of the questions I'll ask you is how can white allies help the Black Men's Travel Network to do a great job? I don't know whether I totally get your point about mentorship. It's really important that somebody's gone through the same experiences. So I don't know, for example, whether you're considering white mentors for you are okay. So it's sort of similar in many ways to how WinIt wasn't just a network for women; it was also a network for men who were allies to championing having women take on more senior positions and be on stage more, etc. Okay, great. Maybe we can discuss that a bit more in a second. Carol and Carmen. So as I understand it, you're both part of the leadership for Diversity and Inclusion Committee within TAMS. Maybe tell us a bit about that.
Well, Linda and I are the co-leads for the Diversity and Inclusion, and that's Linda Biko, Diversity and Inclusion strand in TAMS. And TAMS is an organisation that's there for both buyer and supplier, and it's about bringing together strong minds to make a change in the industry. And the D&I strand for me is the heart of everything that TAMS is trying to do, because it's about the people. And, you know, without good people, there is nothing. So the D&I strand for me is about showcasing travel across all the diverse strands. So race, gender, LGBTQ, disability and mental health, and making sure that the vein that runs across it all is equality. But coming back to race, what we want to do is ensure that both the people that are already in the industry sees the value and the beauty of travel and knows that there is a pathway and a place for them. And for the people that are looking on the outside, looking in, that we give them the road to travel and be successful. So as Rangan has mentioned, the mentoring, the networking, the resources, we will build those resources. We will provide toolkits that will allow them to have that uncomfortable conversation that we talked about. We will give them the terminology that highlights the differences in culture, and that, you know, Black in America is different to how Blacks see it in the UK, how Blacks see it in Africa, you know, and really get people educated around race and see that there is a big melting pot, that we can all be strong and deliver something that will be really special for all. And as I said, the vein is equality. And that's what I believe the D&I strand is all about. It's about being the voice for those people that are scared to speak, allowing those people to speak, and by giving them the knowledge and giving everyone a seat at the table so that no one is excluded and they can feel a part of everything that we're doing in the travel industry, so that awakening and the colourblind that we spoke about, when people look around, they'll always be looking around with their heads up and not their heads down.
Sorry, Carmen, you want to say something as well?
No, I was going to say too, that being on that committee was particularly important. I always believe in a voice and having a voice and being able to be heard. The wonderful thing about that D&I group is that we're not all Black. It is very diverse across the board. And see, diversity can mean a lot of things. So there has to be, it's an opportunity to define what those terms are, as Carol said, because diversity can mean diversity of skills, not just diversity of people. And for me, it takes it a further than just equality, but equity, because something's equal doesn't mean it's equitable across the board. And so what does that mean to folks? I have a picture, an illustration, and I'll send it to you, Paul, just for that. But it's three people standing at a fence. They all have access to the fence. But one is taller, so he can see over the fence, and the other two are there. They all have equal place there. They have equal access, but they all can't see. Where equity has it, well, the tallest person can see, but then they have steps so that the others have that same viewpoint as opposed to just across the board. And so I think that's important, that the perspective is also looked at, and the way that we look at things, and we can bring about those perspectives, because as Carol said, we all have different experiences. We all come from different places. We all have something to say. And I think that's the conversation that we have to have. And I would also say to my white counterparts, don't be afraid to ask the questions, because that lets me know that you are wanting to learn, even if it doesn't come out the right way. I'm multilingual, but there may be something I say, in French that's not quite grammatically correct. And somebody who's a native will say, no, say it this way. Well, that's the way I feel about speaking race or speaking, equity. You might have the question, it may not come out the way you thought it should, but that lets me know, okay, let's start from here. Let's use this as an opportunity to educate. And tone is very important. We can't be upset when somebody asks a question and blast them, and I think that's sometimes why people are afraid sometimes to say things to us, because, they may feel, we might blast them for saying something. But for me, it's how we relay the message, how we define the terminology, and the tone in which we use it, so that it can be heard and listened by everyone.
I think it's a really important point, and something that we've talked about internally at Festive Road, and actually on my call with you, Carol, originally when we were sort of thinking about this interview, I talked about the fact that I was nervous about this interview, because I'm nervous about saying the wrong thing, all with the right intent and the right heart. But if I use a wrong turn of phrase, or I wonder if that's why there hasn't been much public voice about prejudice within the travel sector, because people are just scared of saying the wrong thing. You agree with that?
I do. I absolutely agree with that, Paul. And I've had many conversations with my white colleagues about different things. I mean, a really simple example is that I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I mentioned that I changed my hairstyle, and she said, "Oh, Carol, I really wanted to say something to you, but I was worried about that I might offend you." Well, the reason why she said that is because I normally have a weave that's long and straight, and she saw herself in me. All of a sudden, I've taken away my weave and I have my natural hair, and she could no longer see herself. So straight away, she thought, if I say something, she might feel offended. Absolutely not. I said to her, just speak to me in the same way that I would say to you if you dyed your hair purple. I say, "Oh, you've dyed your hair purple." So I think that's what it's about, and that's a really simple example. But we just want people, as Carmen has said, it's about the tone. And if you ask a question, we know that you're just interested, And as a Black person, if someone speaks to you and says, "Oh, what about this?" and you come back to them in the wrong tone, then that says more about the person than it is about being Black or white. That's the individual. So I think, ask the questions, And for me, it will be, someone's actually showing interest in me as a person. And, if I felt that someone had said something that offended me, I'd say, oh, by the way, what did you mean by that or whatever? And I'm within my rights to say that, and we'd have a discussion about it. But I think it's far worse to say nothing than not to have the discussion.
I guess the risks are high. That's part of the problem. It's so emotionally charged, especially when you've got, Black Lives Matter marches in all major cities across the world, and you're seeing, the direct result of racism in the police and Black community relations is in some instances death. It's so emotionally charged that people are worried that actually they don't get a second chance if they say something wrong. Ranga, I know you wanted to say something about this as well.
No, I wanted to just echo what Carol was saying. It's really about, we don't mind curiosity, educate yourself, and question the many norms in our industry that we have and within the workplace. I've had people just come and touch my hair, and it's like, you don't do that to anyone,
No.
Ask them first. Ask them first. If you ask me, I might say, okay, do you want to touch it?
Yeah, you probably say no thanks, weirdo, but
It is. It's in order for us to move forward, we need to have these uncomfortable conversations, and think about us, we constantly have to navigate a workplace where sometimes people don't even realize they're being offensive, like the touching of the hair, and we have to focus on not being perceived as angry or threatening. You don't want to be the angry Black guy in the office, and we're just looking for a way we can blend in, and it's tough.
Well, I guess. It's where you get to a point that you don't have to think like that anymore. It's where those sorts of things are nothing to do with race or difference in color or whatever it might be. That some people say inappropriate things to me occasionally, but I know it's nothing to do with race or anything else. It's just they've said the wrong thing. When we're at that stage, that's when we're on the right pathway, right? Where you don't have to think it's about racial prejudice or not understanding or anything like that.
Correct, exactly. It's about, it's not just about, hire more Black people, but it's about creating an environment that's safe enough for Black people to feel like they belong in the organization, and that's exactly what you said, Paul. Yeah.
I was going to add to that too. We have to be allowed to say what, we feel and express what we need to say, even from a professional standpoint. And to Ranga's point, there are times that I can be direct and, but I'm the type of person that if you're asking me the question, I will give you the honest answer, but it can't be perceived that I'm the angry Black woman. I know that I've been in situations where one person could come in and say the same thing to, in this example, it was the COO. But if I came in there, it was a whole different, reception situation, and it was not perceived, that I'm intended from a professional level. I was accused of not being professional, even though, it was the same thing, and I was bringing a point to light. And then the reverse side of that too, Paul, we can't be offended when somebody asks us. And that's why I say tone is so important, because we really are diplomats. It's each one teach one. And so you can't always save the world, but you can start with each individual and talking to people and learning. But we can't be offended and just come off, when somebody's asking us a question. We have to take the high road, and be able to say, let me teach you or let me show you. And if that person's willing and receptive to listening, it can go a long way. And so, that's the other part of that I'd like to add to what Ranga and Carol have said.
I mean, I think, let's go on, Carol.
And also, in the last couple of weeks or months now, I've really questioned myself, when it comes to, because, a lot of people say, oh, Carol, you're so passionate, you've got a lot of energy, you're quite vocal. And I've actually taken a step back, especially on this topic, and said, am I actually channeling this in the right way? And am I being constructive? in order to get the right answers and the right decisions. And I have questioned myself, because with infidelity, I have got very much engaged in the D&I piece around race and opening dialogue, etc., being part of focus groups, etc. And, you know, I have been quite vocal, but there's times in, you know, in the cold light of day, I've thought, okay, are you doing this in the right way? Take a breath. Are you delivering the message? And I've asked myself, are you doing this because you're a Black person now speaking up about race? Or do you genuinely feel that, you know, your tone and the way you're behaving is the wrong way? And I think deep down inside, I'm actually questioning my colour and not just accepting that, you know, I'm doing the right thing, I'm asking the right questions. We're at a time where if we don't use this moment now, we never will. So, but I have questioned myself, and when I think about it, I think I'm challenging because I'm a Black woman now being very vocal and fighting for something, you know.
And I think that's, you know, okay, we have to be able to fight for that. And I will give you an example, you know, going back to our founder, our holiday party last year was not just our Christmas holiday party, but it was also a celebration of our 50th anniversary. But me, and just so everyone knows, you know, ICF is, you know, now just because it was started by a Black man, you know, it is a very diverse company, but when you get into the higher levels, it's not as much anymore. And so I was determined, because we have millennials, we have folks that just don't know who the Tuskegee Airmen, just like your question at the beginning. So even at that party, I had to stand up and say, listen, as a Black person who has a company started by a Black person, we need to celebrate this man. And the company needs to know who founded this and who this founder is. And so we rented out an entire museum in DC, and on the red carpet coming through, there were large pieces of who he was and this images of who he was, because I wanted to make sure that he was in the forefront. And I think, you know, the climate certainly for all of us is much better now, because the conversations are happening across the globe, not just in the US, but across the globe. The death of George Floyd. Not that these things weren't happening, they've been happening for 400 years, but we didn't have the privilege of technology. We didn't have, you know, social media. That is the upside of that. And now we're able to record and show what has been happening. But we have to be allowed to also stand up for ourselves. And I think that's been an issue that we have not been able to do, because it has been misconstrued, you know, that we are being unprofessional or confrontational, and that's simply not the case.
I think the thing is, the anger is understandable. It's completely understandable. But, you know, in sort of hard and fast terms, this is about changing mindsets. And anger often embeds mindsets. And what we need to do here is change people's thinking, and that requires engagement. So this type of conversation, I think, is really important. I remember learning of the moment that Nelson Mandela decided to wear the Springbok jersey when he went to the World Cup, and he was sort of highly criticised for it. But his point was, actually, this is the way that we're going to create allies in the white community in South Africa to help to drive change. And, you know, he could have very easily, he was angry for a number of years, and rightly so, but he chose a moment of pacification to make the point. And I think that's really interesting, is that, to your point, Ranga, it's about creating the environment for people to be able to speak their minds and have the right dialogue. And that's the most important thing. What other, I guess, tangible things can or should we be doing within the community? Carol, you talked about a toolkit of some sort.
Yeah, so what we've done is, with Infidelity, we've put together what we call our race conversation toolkit. And what it does is it just spells out, you know, the company's thinking on race. It's given some education around terminology. It's given some advice around having the difficult and uncomfortable conversation. It's given thoughts around, that you need to address it. There's been lots of focus groups and there's been a lot of discussion. And I think that's a really good step towards showing the staff within Fidelity, both black and white, that this is an important topic and it's being addressed, and everybody from the grassroots needs to be engaged and feel a part of it. So I think, companies doing more of that and not just creating something that, everyone sees on Monday and forgets on Friday, keeping up the momentum, dealing with the actions that have come out of the focus group, showing the numbers, showing the changes, and keeping the conversation going. And I think that's really, really important. And for those companies out there that have D&I areas in their company that have got a D&I team in their company, just really looking at what they're actually doing and saying, are we making a difference, or is it just a name on our org chart? Because that's important. It's not just about saying, well, we have a D&I strand in the organisation. It's about saying, well, what are you actually doing? What are the differences and holding them accountable for making that change, and also making sure, because, I've heard many, many times that people don't leave companies, they leave managers, and making sure that the managers are accountable for ensuring that they are demonstrating that they're treating all their staff equally, and they all have level pecking, and having that in terms of documentation, development, training, so that they can't shy away from it. And we don't want to hear leaders saying, well, I feel uncomfortable having this conversation. You can't be a leader if you're not prepared to have an open and frank discussion with anybody. And why would you feel uncomfortable speaking to a black person different to a white person? We're people, and it's important that, it becomes part of everyone's DNA that it is a conversation. And the conversation, if it's constructive, is about, where am I going to take this person? How am I going to work with them? Based on what they've told me, how am I going to make that happen in a really positive and tangible way?
How do people, so there's leaders out there who want to start having the right conversation, where do they access this toolkit, Carol?
Well, we've done it for Fidelity, and we plan to do one for the D&I strand TAMS. Okay. So as soon as that's done, it will be out there. And we're hoping to launch our first toolkit for the Black History Month.
Okay, fantastic. Good timing. Ranga, the Black Men's Travel Network, we mentioned earlier on about the opportunity for mentoring. What should leaders of travel firms out there be doing? How can they connect with you on the type of opportunities that you're presenting?
Really, it's about championing and being an advocate for, the Black community, for non-minorities within the travel industry. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn through GBTA. I'm very involved in GBTA Ladders, which is a mentorship on the GBTA strand. And also TAMS with Carol invited me to be part of that community too. So I'm always here and would love to get more people involved in the Black Men's Travel Network and mentorship and being advocates for us,
Okay, great. I think of all the things that I've heard during the last 45, 50 minutes, seems to have gone very, very quickly. Carol, it's actually your line about you can't be a leader unless you're prepared to have an open and honest conversation. And if there's one thing that people watching this should take account of, is either ask their leaders or challenge their leaders to have that conversation, or if you are a leader out there, to actually take the initiative initiative to do that within your organisation. So thank you for giving us that line and all the fantastic insights. Carmen, I know you have given me a long reading list and film list of things that I need to be watching out for. I tried to watch some of them when I was on holiday in Rhodes last week, but I've still got plenty to get through. So thank you for that. And maybe on the post, I'll post some of those components as well. Carmen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. Enjoyed this conversation.
Great. Ranga, all over in Seattle, you got up very early for this, and we're very appreciative of it.
No, thank you so much for having me, Paul.
And Carol, thank you very much for challenging me and Festive Road to have this dialogue, to record this dialogue, and then to release it in the hope that it will just trigger more people to start having the right conversation. I really appreciate you being somebody prepared to challenge me on that.
Thank you, Paul, for giving me this stepping stone, which is one of the things that I mentioned when we first discussed this. And, I think that you've been an absolute amazing ally. And I think that, we need more Pauls in the travel industry to help us on our way.
I don't think you need more Pauls. More allies, yes, not more Pauls. That's not a good thing. Guys, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining our In Conversation series. We hope to be doing a lot more on diversity and inclusion in the future, and we'll be releasing further interviews later on in the year. For the time being, have a great day. Thanks for joining.